This program features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is why the Niconico Pride is such a firm favourite.
It's Kinky Tail.
He just looks ready for a fight. This is still her territory.
The Avoca boys are here to stay.
How insane was that? Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a beautiful day in South Africa. It is the perfect weather conditions for us to be out and about this afternoon. My name is Tristan, and on camera I've got Craig, and, well, it is another episode of our Safari Lives, a time where we celebrate our characters for the week. We'll follow where their movements have been, as well as we'll just take a closer look at some of the more special characters that we have. So it's going to be a very good, epic sort of... What were we, Monday today? I keep forgetting that Safari Lives has moved on to a Monday and not a Sunday anymore. But it will be a nice start to the week, and hopefully we'll be able to cover lots and lots of what's happened over the last little bit. Now remember, we are going to be interactive, so hashtag Safari Live on Twitter or at FC on the YouTube chat, and we will be discussing, like I say, all things character related. Now, I was saying that it's been a good week and that we will be kind of catching up with all of our characters, and I say it's been good because there's been lots of them this week. So take a look at just where everybody has been during the course of the last 7 days.
The dry conditions continue to prevail and provide incredible sightings for us in our Sabi Sand Traverse. We started the week in fine style as we had a royal leopard buffet. Tingana once again stole Hosana's kill, only for Tandi to arrive on the scene and make a kill of her own. Klalamba and Tandi inevitably lost their kill to the boys and moved further east. The boys meanwhile separated, Tingana moving north before reappearing later in the week in the central parts of Djuma. Hosana meanwhile went back to his favourite spots at Galago Pan and Quarantine. Tandi, not to be outdone, made one more turn through Djuma, joining Hosana at a kill on Quarantine. While the royal leopard family was arguing over a Sunday lunch, the lions too were squabbling over a buffalo meal. Part of the Niconico Pride were joined by one of the Avoca boys, much to the pride's dismay. After their meal, the pride moved off, before following a herd of buffalo through Djuma to the north. A few days later, they reappeared, following the same herd of buffalo, this time to the south.
I have heard absolutely nothing on the radio. I'm so sorry. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Safari Lives. I managed to unplug my earpiece. My name is James Henry. My great and abundant apologies. That thumb was David's thumb. He is on camera today, in case you were wondering. He's obviously very worried I wasn't going to try and introduce him. Good. It's a glorious afternoon here in the Western Kruger National Park. It is about 30 degrees Celsius or so, 86 degrees Fahrenheit unless I am much mistaken. So perfect temperatures, and above us a cicada has begun singing as we look to see the highlights of that leopard's life over the course of the last week or so. That leopard is Tingana, 13-year-old Duke of Djuma and great thief that he is. We shall talk a lot about his thievery over the course of the next 2 hours or so. Please ask us any questions you'd like to using the hashtag SafariLive on Twitter. It would be lovely to hear from you, and you can use the chat stream on YouTube by @ing FC. Yes, @ing is now in fact a verb. Whether you will find it in a, well, it's strictly speaking a participle, I suppose, but @ is a verb. Yes, good. Now, apparently I'm waffling too much, so the director, who has taken a dim view of my life generally over the last day, has asked that we go across to Tristan, who will start talking about the family feud that is going on with the leopards.
Indeed we will be, and I believe James is in the hot water with the director at this stage. Before the drive he was complaining and moaning about the fact that he was in trouble. Now, James was alluding to the fact that Tingana has been an absolute thief during the course of the last few months, and he really is very good at finding it. He once again thieved a meal from Hosanna last night, and so it seems to be the kind of family trait that goes on. And well, last week, Sunday, to kick off our week of highlights and things that have been happening, there was a massive family feud and a lot of thievery that took place.
Nyala, followed by Tundi, who cautiously looked over her shoulder knowing that Hosanna and Tingana were close by. Hosanna stared longingly at Tingana as he snacked on his hoisted meal. He was, however, interrupted by Koza, the male hyena, who popped in for a bite. Hosanna made it known that there was only room for one scavenger here. Koza, a few minutes later, made his next stop at Tundi's unhoisted kill. Hosanna decided this would be a meal for two, until the tug of Nyala began. Koza, more interested in the prize than the game, was pulled down the bank on a Nyala-style sleigh. The two then sat gobbling guts for glory. Enter the Duke. Tingana demonstrated his dominance as he burst onto the scene, scattering scavenger and sun. Pressing us even further, Tingana then hoisted the heavy Nyala straight up the tree. Tundi, unimpressed by the thievery of the males, could only scold them with her glare. Meanwhile, Tingana sat high in his perch, looking down on his son, showing him just who was the dominant male in town.
Well, wasn't that just the most insane kind of sighting that we could have started off with? It was really ridiculous to kind of be there and see what played out. Klalamba, Tundi, Hosanna, Tingana, and, well, throw in a hyena or two as well. And it just made for the most crazy kind of evening. It just went back and forth, and it was a kind of battle royale between all of them. Luckily, no one really got hurt by anything. It was one of those kind of sightings where everything happened the way you would kind of want it to happen. Everybody sort of found bits of the food and each got a little feed off of it, but no one actually got hurt at the end of the day. And, well, the Duke definitely stamped his authority as to who is who. Now, we looked at that kind of clip, and you guys all kind of see who is in this sort of in the sighting. Now, I thought I would start off, because this week we're going to focus on little Hosanna and his sort of relationship with Tundi. Now, basically what I'm going to do before we even get there is we're going to start with this family tree, because some of you might be new to Safari Lives and you're not 100% sure who all of these leopards may be. Others of you might be a little confused as to how it all works. But basically, we have, let's start with Karula. So Karula was a dominant female that was here on Djuma. She then had multiple different litters, which we'll draw out just now. So she had, to start with, Tundi and her sister Shadow. So there was Tundi and Shadow that were born, and they were born some 12 years ago. Then she had another litter, which was Induna and Mishu. All right, and they were there. Then she had, let's put this a little bit further down, otherwise I'm going to run out of space. Then she had Shivinzi and Shivambalana. Shiv and Shivam. There we go. And then she had Quarantine. Well, she actually lost a cub, but we're not going to put that in right now. So we have Q and Kunuma. And lastly, she had Hosanna and Shongile. Right. Now, all of these different cubs that she had, that spanned over a roughly about a 9-year period that she had these sets of cubs. She was an incredibly successful female and was very, very, very famous in these parts. And the reason why is because of her success at raising cubs. Now, in all of these litters that you see here, she actually didn't lose any of these. So all of these basically went independent, and then by sort of chance, some of them have disappeared. Some we don't really know where they ended up. We know that they distributed away, but we don't know really kind of what happened to them. And then obviously we've got some of them that are still around and still with us. But she was incredibly successful in her way of doing things. Now, in this kind of graph that we've got here, basically what happened is that she mated with multiple different males. So all of these particular individuals could potentially have different fathers. Tandi's father is a bit of a kind of debate as to who that could be, but we think possibly this could be Mafufanyan. So we'll put Mafuf. Or it could have been Jordan. So those would be the two that would kind of be in that area that could potentially be there. Jordan, maybe the first original Jordan, possibly could have been him. There was also another male at the time, but I forget his name at this time. So those were the kind of fathers, but this particular litter over here, the only father that we can kind of know of that mated with her at the time was Tingana. So you can see that even though we've got this kind of family tree that Tandi and Hosanna are related, they actually have different fathers, and so it ties them all together. So that's why we say it was a family feud that we were having between all of them, because actually they're all related in really kind of complicated way. Right, now Kirsty, I have not heard what you were asking me to do. Right. Now, I believe that we are going to send you across to Brent, who's got, well, some male lions that have decided to enter the pride.
Welcome to this episode of Safari Lives, and we are with the beloved Niconico Pride. Some of them are missing, but there is contact calling going on, so I think the others are not too far off. There's the Talamati male, but I've only counted 8 Nkahumas, and so that means there's 3 missing, but I'm sure they're not too far. There's also the 3 mangy Mangen males. Good afternoon, my name is Brent Leo Smith. I have Senzo Mkeys on camera, and we are taking an in-depth look at all our cat characters today on Safari Lives. This is very exciting to be with the Niconico Pride, who've been away for a little while, and actually last week on Safari Lives, they weren't too far away from here, if I remember correctly. No, it was on SABC on Sunday. They weren't too far away from here, just probably 200 or 300 meters from here, and there we are. So at the moment there is complete confusion and upheaval with the male lions toing and froing out of our beloved Nkahumas. So let's go have a look what happened last week. The Niconico Pride of Lions feasted on a buffalo kill this week, allowing us to become more confused by their current dynamics. A usual meal with snarls and sounds. The Avoca male let one of the Mangeni males share his meal, although still snarling. It was the lionesses who got the final snap. The mangy Manganis, much like the parasitic mite themselves, have stuck around the Niconico Pride. The lionesses do not tolerate touching, but are allowing the young males to be around. In contrast, the Niconico sub-adult male still gets all the attention from his pride ladies. But the Talamati male seems to be getting quite comfortable with the pride too. Is there a future coalition in the making? Now, to be honest, none of us can explain what's happening. Avoca male feeding next to mangy Mangen, Talamati worming his way into the pride, and those 3 poor mangy Mangen males living off scraps that the pride give them. Now, the Talamati male is, in theory, related to the Niconico Pride. The Talamati Pride and the Niconico Pride come from the same place, so they are related. But it is unusual for this sort of dynamic to happen, where the young male is sort of basically forcing himself onto another pride of females, and in this case the poor Niconico Pride have 4 young males forcing themselves upon them. So very, very, very interesting times. The rest of the Talamati Pride, where that one male comes from, are busy mating with Avoca males up in the north, We have a question from a Niconico viewer wondering, can two male lion coalitions join? It is possible, but only when they're quite young. There's a very brief period where male lion coalitions form from the ages of about 2.5 to 4. Anything older than that, it's very unlikely that they will form a coalition. It is possible, but very, very unlikely. Carl would like to know whether I think the Nkuhuma females are immune to mange. No. If you look carefully on some of the females, they're already starting to show signs of mange. Let's have a look here carefully, quickly. As soon as those manky Mangen boys get up, the females will often growl and snarl at them. But and there is signs of mange starting to show on some of the females of the Nkuhuma pride, which has happened over the last couple of dry seasons. They definitely seem to have a higher immunity to the sarcoptic mange mite. Now, for those of you who don't know what mange is caused by a little arachnid called a mite. It burrows into the skin, and the pussy lesions and holes that are on their bodies are actually caused by the lions having an allergic reaction to the mite itself. So it causes the hair to fall out. The mites are also an immuno inhibitor, so it inhibits their immune system as well as inhibiting their appetite. So it is quite a problem for the lions to get it. Certain prides, like the Styx pride, are also heavily affected by it. But as soon as the rains come, it seems to clear up. And the fact that these these young boys have made it to this age already, it means they possibly are going to pull through once the rains arrive. Now, one must remember that mange is a naturally occurring element out here in the Sabi Science Game Reserve, and it is part of Mother Nature's controlling agents to ensure the predators' populations don't get too big during the dry season and really affect the prey populations. We are very lucky to have the Nkuhumas, even if they are lazy. They've been busy over the last few days, and they have chased the Styx pride off a buffalo kill, I think yesterday, on Cheetah Plains. So they've been busy, so they're not too hungry. Bubble Girl would like to know whether lions with mange mate. Yes, it does happen sometimes. I can remember the Styx pride in the past, some of the females, while they were quite heavily infected with mange, mating with the Birmingham boys. So it is possible. It is unlikely, especially because the fact that it's an immunosuppressant and an appetite suppressant. You would think they wouldn't have enough energy for mating, but I have seen it happen, but it is, again, unusual. Although there seems to be nothing normal about the Nkuhuma pride and their antics at the moment with all the young males. Now, of course, these young males are not joining this pride for mating at the moment. I think they're more joining this pride for an easy source of food and safety. And the Avoca boys, although last week we saw an Avoca boy feeding with the Nkuhumas, but it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, especially as the wet season starts to come. Will these young boys disperse off on their own again, or will they stay with the Nkuhumas? In the meantime, let's send you back to Tristan, who's still chatting about our lovely leopards.
Indeed we are, Brent, and it is going to be very interesting to see how the Lions scenario plays out. I have a funny feeling that we might be seeing a very kind of interesting development with those Nkuhumas, and that maybe there will even be a split between them. With so many mouths to feed as we go into the wet season, it's going to become quite tricky. But one good thing is that, I hadn't seen the Manganes, in fact I hadn't seen them at all before this week, and I'd seen a lot of photos of them, but they definitely didn't look as bad as some of the photos. So it seems as though maybe with a stable environment, not being stressed as much, as well as feeding a bit more regularly, that their immune system is maybe starting to ramp up a bit, and the mange is definitely starting to look a little bit better, which is good. Anyway, back to our leopards and why we kind of here. So I said that we're going to focus this afternoon on pretty much discussing Hosanna and his relationship with, well, particularly one leopard around here, which is his older sister Tandi. And so I showed you that he's kind of how he's related to Tandi. There's obviously a very big gap between the two of them. He's not even 3 years old yet. Tandi is obviously about 12. And I've just added a bit of more information in all of this. And so what this is here, this is Tandi's lineage coming down. And this is important to notice because basically what's happened over the course of Hosana's life is when he was born, he obviously had his dominant mother, who was really dominant in this particular area, and Tingana, his father, who was also in his prime at that point when he was born. At 10 years old, he was really looking good, and obviously Karula at the time when he was born was about 11. So the two of them were really right in control of what was going on at Djuma. On rolled a year, Hosana grew up, was going absolutely perfectly fine, and then his tragedy struck in the form of Karula disappearing. That then meant that we had poor Hosana and Shongile that then had to go off on their own. And so, you know, at a year old, he was very inexperienced and very, very, very tricky for him to know what to do. He essentially hadn't really learnt how to be a leopard, well, adult leopard yet. He was still learning from his mother. She was still providing from them. And so, you know, he would have been thrown out with a lot to still learn. Now, because of that, he had this, probably the sense that he needed to go towards particularly other female leopards, and this relationship with Tandi started to kind of form, and we started to see these interactions. And it was not only because Hosana was starting to move towards her quite regularly, but Tandi herself started to move into Karula's territory. So Tandi started to seize the opportunity of coming into a prime area like Djuma, and so we started to see the two of them kind of shifting towards one another. Now that meant that there was going to be a lot of interactions that were going to take place between these two, and when Hosana first kind of started to interact with Tandi, it was an interesting time, and it's an important thing we need to note is that Tamba basically was born to Tandi a little bit after Hosana was born to Karula. So essentially Tamba was basically a few months younger than Hosana, but not by much. And so when this all happened with Hosana losing Karula, essentially Tandi was still with Tamba, but it was getting to that phase where she was starting to kind of push. That kind of relationship will be important to notice when we start to go through some of the images that we've prepared for you. And I think we can start with the first one that we put together. But basically what you'll see here is this is the very first time we saw the two of them together. Now you'll see there's Tandi, she's busy drinking at the moment. So she's going to basically be sitting there drinking. I'm pretty sure she was well aware of Hosana's presence. There Hosana is approaching. Now, if we can just stop there quickly, Kirst. So basically what happened there is that she was drinking. She's completely confident as an adult, big female leopard. She's confident that she's been able to kind of go and drink right next to him. And you'll see when he approaches now, so we're going to go back a little bit, and you'll see as he approaches, he's approaching as though he's approaching his mom or his sister. He's absolutely comfortable with her presence, but you see her reaction to him immediately. It's unlike what he would have received from his mom or his sister. He got a very aggressive reaction from her. That's her saying to him, I don't know you, you're not my son, back off, go away from me. And he would have immediately been taken aback by that. That is not the usual kind of behavior that he was expecting, but essentially he's now got to try and kind of put on a brave face. So if we roll it forward a little bit, he kind of carries on trying to get closer towards her, and you can see Tandi is snarling and very aggressive. Now, if you look at her posture here, that is a posture of a very, very, very kind of dominant cat. Basically, she's standing very tall, she's baring her teeth, and she's showing Hosana that even though he is the same size as her, she is not worried about him at all. So you can see there's confidence in there. There is in no way is she worried, and she actually now makes the first move towards where Hosana is. And look at Hosana, he just wants to kind of join her and walk with her, and you see as soon as he moves, she stops, and you can see her tail is flicking, and that is her basically saying, I'm not impressed with this leopard's presence at all. And now it's interesting because she then goes and smells pretty much around the area of where he was. There she's sharpening claws. All of this is basically her kind of going through the motions. Now Hosana himself is not really sure at this stage what's going on, so he's trying to kind of mark territory. He's only a year old at this stage, so marking territory is not ideal. Now you can see in this, as they're walking, Hosana is right at the back, Tandi is the one walking with purpose in front, and she's brave and strong and kind of doesn't really matter too much about what Hosanna is doing. She's not paying too much attention to him. She knows she's bigger, she's stronger. He's just following her because he's just trying to seek companion as much as possible. And it paid off for him, because what actually ended up happening is poor little Tumba actually got outcast a little bit. He got pushed away by Tundi, and Hosanna actually then started to share a few meals with Tundi, but not because she would really allow him to. He used to try and sneak in when she would go for water, and he'd try and get a bit of a meal there, and then she would chase him away, and he'd have to kind of go and sit and wait and wait and wait, and then he'd pick up all the scraps that would drop down, much like a hyena would do. So that was his initial kind of interaction with Tundi, but you could see Tundi really bossed that whole relationship. She wasn't having any of his nonsense, and she certainly wasn't threatened by him in any way whatsoever. And it was interesting because theoretically with the cub at the time, with Tumba, she should have been a little bit more kind of grumpy about it. She should have probably pushed at him a little harder, but you know, she knew Tumba was of the age where he probably could look after himself, and she didn't see Hosanna at his size as too much of a threat to her offspring, and so she felt that she could take care of Hosanna on her own. So it kind of started off with Tundi very much in the ascendancy. Right, now talking about ascendancy, James Henry, who's basically on top of the food chain here in the presenting department, is with the other individual, the Njuma, that is also on top of the food chain in the form of Tingana.
There we have the leopard on top of the food chain, Tingana. He's also on top of the sleep chain at the moment. He's having a good hard doze, as we say in this part of the world. You can see his belly is rotund. It is full of his ill-gotten gains, which are hanging in the tree above him. A beautiful milkberry tree when it's in leaf. A little bit scraggly at the moment. Can we have a look at it, David, if you don't mind? Would that be too much trouble? No, there it is. Good, thank you. Very nice. Now, climbing a tree like this could possibly bring with it a few injuries, and we think perhaps that is what ailed the left paw of the thieving Duke a little bit earlier.
While devouring his ill-gotten Nyala gains, Tingana gave us a clear look at the clean wound on his injured paw. The injury, probably incurred while hoisting his stolen prize, has left him with a slight limp. But the old Duke remains confident and dominant at Djuma.
Now, that funny little injury he had, I think he got climbing that great big scraggly tamburti tree. I don't think it was anything else. It looked like it may have been some sort of claw that nicked him. Possibly he got it when he was mating with that young female. I can't see any other leopard having seen the interaction between him and the hyena and Tundi and Tlalamba and Hosanna at that Nyala kill last week. I can't believe that there's any other leopard or any other cat that would have got anywhere near him or near close enough to him to inflict an injury. So I think he got it climbing up that tamburti tree. They are quite spiky things, and obviously he was carrying a very heavy load. I don't think it's done him any harm whatsoever. Now, Tingana has made a habit of stealing. He's done a lot of lifting of Hosanna's meals over the last little while, and he did it again this morning. We're sitting underneath a tree. Well, we're just about to be sitting underneath a tree in which Hosanna had stashed a fairly large kill. We think it was a young kudu. Anyway, Tingana arrived early this morning and took it away yet again. Now, I don't know if that injury has healed, but I can tell you, and I'm sorry I missed the Painted Wolf. You wanted to know if the injury had healed. I don't know Painted Wolf, but I can tell you that he walked up here without a limp and he climbed the tree with no trouble at all. So I don't know if it's healed completely. I doubt it's totally closed over. I seriously don't think it's having any ill effects on him at all. And he certainly has walked a long way. Last evening, David and Sydney had him walking into the northwestern parts of Torchwood, and he's come probably, as the crow flies, I'm going to say 5 or 6 kilometres, which means that he's probably walked down to the south and around, you probably multiply that by 3. So he's walked around about 18 kilometers, I think, which is about 14 miles over the last 12 hours or so. So if he was having trouble with his left front foot, I don't think he would have done that. There we go. Poor little fellow. He's got a few allergies from the pollen. Now, this cat is not going to do much, but I'm going to wait here hoping that he climbs the tree. And Brent Leo Smith's cat seems to be doing something.
Well, one of the lionesses decided it's a thirsty day, and she is right in front of the magnificent Chitwa Chitwa private game lodge here in the northern Sabi Sand, South Africa. So sometimes you cannot even leave your room to get a sighting of a big cat. Okay, she's going to go for a drink now, so we're going to move in a bit closer. Philip was wondering, is a single line dispersal more successful than a multiple line dispersal? No. When you get groups of boys, a couple of boys leaving together, they are generally far more successful than a single line dispersal. So I just want to get you guys into a good spot for her having a drink. And now you will see other game drive vehicles around us. That game drive vehicle, strangely enough, is driven by my little brother. There we go, thirsty girl. Now you see how the cats are very picky in these large water holes where they choose to drink, because by drinking there, she's making sure that no crocodile can get to her. So if she drank where the water was deeper, there would be a chance that the crocs might be able to get to her. But there, she's very safe from crocodiles. She's heard something. Might be wondering if the rest of the pride are not going to come down for a drink as well. Isn't this just the most amazing scene? And the other reason she's drinking where she is Debbie in Vancouver would like to know, when will the Nkuma sub-adult females have their first estrus? Normally at about 3, Debbie, at about 3 years old is the first estrus. Now it's normally not a successful one in terms of cubs, but that's when they normally have their first estrus. Now we're quite lucky that the lions are being moving and up to stuff at this time of the day. It's very hot, about 30 degrees Celsius, 80 odd Fahrenheit. They're normally quite flat at this time of the day, but we're being spoilt today. Very thirsty kitty. Peaceful scenes here at the Chitwa Waterhole this evening. It'll be interesting to see where they move to next. Are they going to hang around here? Or are they going to move north or south again? Paula would like to know, if the lions covered themselves in mud, would it prevent the mange? No, Paula. As we said, it's a mite. It's burrowed. It's actually sitting under the skin follicles. It goes in at the hair follicle, sorry, So it's sitting at the base of that hair follicle. And lions are not big fans of mud. I'm just checking where she was looking to see if there wasn't possibly another lioness on her way down. Doesn't look like it for now. This is very, very, very serene. Sure, they might have walked quite a long way today, judging by the thirst she has at the moment.
So that's why we say do not walk around at night time. Yeah. I was telling a lady here. There was actually another pride of mine.
Very, very, very lovely. Okay, well, we're going to stay with this female for a little bit longer to see if the rest of the pride make their way down to the water. While we do that, let's send you back to Tristan, who's still delving into the leopard dynamics of the northern Sabi Sands.
We are indeed, and so when delving into leopards, one must become a leopard and even add the little spot patterns that we have to have, as well as leopard fingers and hands. And so we have now gone full leopard, which means that we can delve into things even deeper than what we were. Now, when you left us last, we were talking about Thandi and Hosanna, and we were talking about kind of the relationship that they've had. And I was explaining that Thandi was at a very critical kind of time, and she was in an interesting time because she had just kind of busy in the process, was busy getting rid of Tamba and kind of pushing him away. She also then obviously started to mate, and when she gets rid of the last cub, that mating would start to happen. And so she started to mate with Tingana, obviously, and in last year, sort of November 2017, she would have had Kalamba. But prior to that, about 2 months before that, or 3 months should we say before that, she unfortunately, well, found our two favorite little cats in the form of Shongile and Hosanna together, and it could explain why she was the way she was. Now, you'll notice what's going to happen here. As you can see, there's Hosanna and Shongile together, little Shongile. It makes me very sad to watch this because I do miss that little cat. She was such a special cat, and we hadn't seen the two of them for so many weeks. And you can see, if you just stop and go back for me, Curse, a little bit, because this is an interesting kind of difference between last clip and what you see from this clip. Now, in the last clip, you had Thandi drinking, and she basically was very aggressive. Now watch the difference with Shongile, and this is what Hosanna probably expected when he was trying to go and meet up with Thandi the last time. He was expecting to have a little kind of head rub, so that affirms a bond between these two. And like I say, they had been split apart for quite a bit. It was the first time we had seen them in a few weeks. And if you roll it on a little bit forward, you'll see he kind of grabs at her paw, and there's a little bit of games that are happening, and then the two of them lay right next to each other. Then entered Thandi, and I remember this like it was yesterday. It was very close to where we're sitting right now in the tent, in fact just across towards Gallagher Pan side. And you can see, look at her body posture now in comparison to even Hosanna. Now Hosanna, earlier when she saw him, she was relaxed but sort of dominant. This right here is of a leopardess that is not impressed with life at all. She's alert, her ears are facing forward, and her body posture is very stiff, and she's very sort of watchful as to what's going on and concentrating on what is exactly happening. Now if we roll it forward a little bit, you'll see that's where the two of them are lying. Now what was interesting about this sighting immediately is that at this point in time, we had no idea that Thandi was pregnant. We were completely unaware that she was pregnant at this time. Obviously she had been mating around this time, but her reaction to what would have happened, I think, would have been driven by the fact that she was pregnant. Now if you watch little Hosanna and Shongile, they weren't really they didn't know anything was going on. The two of them were lying together. There you can see now, stop it there and just go back a little bit and watch very carefully Shongile. She starts to chuff a little bit, so she spots Thandi and she immediately starts to chuff in order to try and talk to Thandi. Now Thandi is not interested at all. You can barely make Thandi out, but she's just on the left side of that thicket. And you'll find then the chuffing wakes up Hosanna. He starts to look around thinking, hang on, maybe mom is back. You can see his dopey kind of face that he generally has, sort of looks around and he kind of just assesses what's going on. Now he immediately is scanning in the hope that maybe his mom is there, or potentially there is another leopard. Now you see Shongile is still, she's adopted a very, 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 oh, there they go now. So they've run off. Now, you would have seen her kind of her body posture, look at how her ears are flat and her body's down, and then she makes a break for it. Now that break has triggered Thandi to chase after her. She leaves Hosana alone completely. There's me being dumbfounded by what's going on. Sorry about that. I got in the way of this whole thing. I remember this very clearly now. But anyway, so we kind of roll it on, and the two of them start really fighting. And like I say, it was a pretty traumatic thing to watch. We then kind of roll on in the evening. There was lots of growling happening, and you can see that's Hosana on the far left, Shongile lying right next to him, and Thandi there. Now, Hosana at this stage, I'm sure, was very confused as to what was going on. He had had a few kind of interactions with Thandi. They'd been aggressive, but had never been this bad. And he kind of kept lying next to his sister, and I don't think he really knew what he was trying to do. He was just kind of sitting there and hoping that he could kind of almost get between the two of them and that this sort of aggression would stop. And so he sat there for a bit, and then Thandi just kept on hammering at Shongile, and eventually sort of Hosana just took a step back, and he actually then eventually went and lay with Thandi, funny enough, when Shongile got chased up the tree and Thandi was below. The two of them lay right next to one another, and it was where we left them. The fights continued into the night, and obviously we all know that was the last time we saw Shongile, which was very, very sad. But you can see that Hosana was at that point still very, very kind of confused as to what was going on. He was submissive, he was trying to side with his sister, and he didn't. I'm pretty sure it's because Thandi was pregnant at that stage, and she was trying to evict any female competition. Also, you must remember at that stage she had just started to dominate on Djuma. We were starting to see her moving further and further and further to the northwest, away from her general territory, which remember was very far south towards Chitwa, Torchwood area, and she started to come northwest up towards the sort of central parts and even western parts of Djuma. And so I think all she was trying to do was just clean house and set herself up for this kind of pregnancy that she was about to have. Now, Painted Wolf, why didn't she attack Hosana? Well, the simple reason for it is probably because she didn't see Hosana first. Hosana was lying right up against that bush, and it was very, very difficult to actually see him, probably. I mean, she might have noticed him, but she kind of locked eyes pretty much onto Shongile. Now, if you look at where Shongile is lying and the line that goes, so if we can just pause it there, Kirst. So if you look on the left where Thandi is, right on the top, you'll see there's a bit of a highlighted area that was from another game drive vehicle spotlight. That's where Thandi was. Now, if you look and take a straight line, it can see that there is a female there, a small female, and knows that she's bigger than Shongile, whereas Hosana, all she probably could see was his tail. Now, in her mind, it could have easily have been Tingana that was lying there. It could have been another big male, and so her focus was to get rid of this female that was in this property, or this little kind of other leopard that was around. Now, I'm pretty sure she scented that it was a female, and that's why she went straight after Shongile. Also, if you look at this, Hosana's not the one that runs. So if we just play it through, you'll see Shongile runs before Thandi makes a break. So she tries, she realizes, hang on, this is not mom. Now she's scared, and you'll find she breaks off and runs. And as she runs, that's when Thandi starts to come. Thandi starts to approach, and you see Shongile sparks the kind of chase, and then Thandi straight after, whereas Hosana, he remained behind and didn't run at all. And so you found he kind of just ended up being bewildered by what was going on, and probably that's why she didn't turn at him at all. If he had broken and run, you might have found her actually pause a little bit to just kind of work out, hang on, what is going on here, and maybe then might have even chased him. We don't know, but that's why I think that happened. And then as it rolled on, she knew that she was fighting with Shongile. Hosana was just a small male off to the side, and she didn't have to worry about him because her sole attention was going to be on this young female that was in her territory, which is very, very kind of interesting. Now, Tom, why Hosana didn't come to the rescue? You must remember, Hosana at this time is just over a year old. He's a year and a half old. Has been this aggressive towards him and has run in and growled and has fought with his sister, and I'm pretty sure he just didn't know what was going on. He was very kind of confused. Like I say, he would go and he would lie next to Shongile and he would growl and he would hiss a little bit through the sighting, but you could see he was wide-eyed the whole time. And don't forget, in that sighting, eventually much later when we kind of got back, Tingana also arrived there as well, and so there was a lot going on, and I think he was just very bewildered by it and probably quite scared. Remember that this is a small leopard at that time. He was not really bigger than Thandi at all. He was kind of similar size to her, and so I'm sure he was just very kind of nervous, and all he tried to do is to try and save himself in many respects too, because once he had kind of partnered with his sister and his sister had gone up the tree, well, he had Thandi down below that he was next to, and he was trying to get back towards Shongile, but she kept blocking the kind of road for him, and so he had to just sit there, and he was very submissive. His head would go down and he would just lie there, and she would growl and hiss at him, and he would just kind of take it very easy. So I think he was just really scared more than anything else. At that age, it's very difficult for him. Kalina, I mean, this is a question that's everyone often asks, I mean, even a lot of the people that work here that were in Kenya at the time have asked me this, and whether I think Thandi killed Shongile. The answer is no, not right there, I don't think. And the reason why I say that is because had she been killed, we would have found evidence of that kill. So we would have either found, Shongile dead. I'm thinking of Klalamba and Thandi, it's all those names together. But anyway, Shongile dead there, in either in a tree that maybe she had been hoisted, or they would have found a drag mark. We would have found some evidence that she had died there. And I mean, we went to that area. I remember Taylor went the next morning. She looked around. Tracks were going all over the place for females and males, and it was really quite tricky to work out what was going on. And so what could have happened, she could have badly injured little Shongile, and Shongile then moved off and maybe died a few weeks later. I like to think that that didn't happen, because I wouldn't like to think of her suffering in any way. Or she just got a fright and she ran and she went into areas that we don't know about. She might have then bumped into another territorial female. She might have bumped into a territorial male. She might have bumped into hyenas, lions. You don't know what kind of happened to her. She also could be sitting in a huge block in Kruger right now as we speak, alive and well, and we just don't know about it. So, I think we've discussed this at length amongst us as guides, and none of us really know what happened to her and whether or not she survived, but I don't think she was killed at that particular fight scene or in that particular area, even though the fighting went on until quite late that night. Had she died there, we would have found some sort of sign of her. Like I say, a drag mark, a bit of a carcass, something would have been left behind for us to indicate that she was no longer there anymore. Where I left her in the tree with Thandi below was literally on the road, so there was no ways we would have missed it. And I went back and walked around there in the following days, and we didn't really find anything, unfortunately. Right, well, we're going to carry on with our kind of analysis of Hosanna's relationship with his sister, and before we do carry on, let's send you back across to, I think, James with Tingana.
Yes, indeed, James and Tingana. I must say, every time I think of little Shongile, I feel a little twang of sadness. She was my favourite. I feel we had a connection. I'm sure that's absolute rubbish, but that's what I feel. We had that wonderful, wonderful sighting of her on foot, a few sightings of her on foot, and the first one, I remember it was with Rexon, and I think it was Jondry, and we didn't really know where she was. Karula had had a kill quite close by, and we were looking around, and then we spotted her sitting under a log just watching us. And so we just sat on a termite mound. She came out from behind the log. She climbed the tree behind us and walked towards us on a branch and then just lay down. And unfortunately, most of the sighting wasn't broadcast because I think we lost signal from the bushwalk backpack or something, I don't remember. And I shot some of it on my cell phone and tried to go live on Facebook on my cell phone. I think it actually worked. We had better 3G signal there. And it was just a very special moment to have this little cat choosing to come and look at me from the top of her tree. And then there was another one when we followed her for about 25 minutes or so from the pan near Treehouse Dam all the way to Treehouse Dam. And on the way there she ate a tortoise and carried on down. It was magic, absolute magic. And I was very sad when she disappeared. And I'm sure, like many of you, you hold on to the almost certainly vain hope that perhaps that interaction you watched with Thandi frightened her off and sent her scuttling around, and as has happened from time to time with other females that have gone missing, they've popped up in photographs from miles away. And many of us hold on to that almost certainly vain hope that Shongile will be one of those leopardesses that pops up a long way from home on a photograph with somebody saying, "Does anybody know who this cat is?" At which point James Richard will probably have a small meltdown along with the rest of us as he posts pictures of Shongile and says, "Yes, we know who this cat is." Wouldn't that just be magical? You can see Tingana, who was Shongile's father, clearly has absolutely no concerns. He doesn't remember his daughter, I don't think. Tingana, do you remember her? She was very sweet. She's much better than you on foot, much braver. I'm not sure she would have turned into a thief like you. Probably. All cats are thieves eventually. Anyway, Tundi doesn't seem to be too much of a thief. She is, however, the grumpiest leopard I've ever met, and I know that many of you get upset if I don't say that our leopards are all beautiful and sweet and great mothers and all of that sort of thing. But I don't believe there's one of you who can argue that Tundi is anything other than extremely bad-tempered.
After the royal bust-up of the day before, Tundi and Tlalamba distanced themselves from the males. Her Majesty wished to spend the cold, blustery day relaxing, but the princess wanted to warm up with play. The grumpy queen was in a mood as foul as the weather. I suppose the scene could be interpreted as quite sweet, if you pretend that Tundi is smiling rather than snarling.
I'm laughing because the shot you're looking at now is so utterly incongruous with the one you've just seen. Anyway, so probably a bit unkind to me to say that she is the, sorry, some helmet shrikes just flew over my head. They were Retz's helmet shrikes, which we don't see real. Probably a bit unkind of me to say that she's the worst-tempered leopard in the whole world ever, but she is pretty bad-tempered. All leopards have their own personalities, and it's fascinating, and it's great. It's what I think makes them such compelling animals. This fellow has a different personality from Hosana. Hosana has a different personality from Shongile, and Karula certainly had a very different personality from Tundi. And so I think that's rather wonderful. So although she was being a bit grumpy with her daughter, I think biologically, if we want to interpret that behaviour, yes, Tundi is impatient, we know that, but we know that she has played a lot with her daughter Tlalamba in the last little while, or over the course of Tlalamba's life, which is now almost 12 months in existence. But at the same time, little Tamba, who was her previous cub, was forced to go independent at round about the same age that Tlalamba is now, give or take a month or two. And so it is possible that Tundi is now starting to say to Tlalamba, rather than "I don't feel like playing now, go and play with a stick," she's saying, "Listen, it's probably time you pressed on." That's possible. I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening, but it is possible that Tundi is now coming into some kind of proto-estrus, or feeling the twinges of nerve in her veins and thinking to herself, maybe I should have one last cub or litter. She's certainly young enough to have another litter, maybe two, but certainly one. Robert, I don't know. Did Karula ever interact with any of Tundi's litters? Did she meet Tamba? I mean, she probably did. Whether they, or what those interactions were like, I'm not sure. I seem to remember there being... No, I don't know. I'm pretty sure Tristan is probably slapping on the desk in the tent now saying, yes, I remember. I am not sure. Will say this, though. Tundi seems to be very fiercely territorial. Now, most leopardesses are fiercely territorial, but she seems to be even more so than many others. We did see Karula interacting with Shadow a number of times. They didn't like to be around each other. I can only assume that it must have been very similar for Karula and Tundi. And so I'm going to say, unless Tamba wandered into Karula's domain, and I don't think he was old enough by the time Karula died, I'm going to say, no, I don't think so, but I don't know for sure. This fat cat really is putting in a performance that belongs somewhere in the realms of, I don't know, it's not Oscar winning right now, especially with the tooth stuck up like it was. Tristan apparently is giving the thumbs down, so he doesn't know of any interactions between Karula and Tandi's offspring. Can we just go into his tooth again, please, David? Because what strikes me about this cat is that he's either a smoker or drinks a lot of coffee, because his teeth are so yellow in comparison with Hosanna's, and I suppose that's just a function of his age. But maybe he's on 40 Texans a day, I'm not sure. Or cigars, as Kirsten says. Yes, he's probably on the Havanas. As soon as we leave here, he sits up and pops a Havana between his teeth and enjoys a good smoke. Yes, look at his eyes opening there at the thought of a Cuban cigar. No, now Porto, the thing with leopards, and in fact most cats, is that they don't fight each other intergender-wise. I'm not sure that that's an acceptable English term. Males and females do not fight with each other for territory. In this area, a male's territory will normally encompass 2 to 3 females' territories. Now, obviously, that's fairly variable. Tingana, at the moment, has the territory of Tandi within his ambit, possibly the territory of that young skittish female to the north, the one that he mated with, but she's quite possibly in the ambit of another male called Gajima. And down to the south, yes, it's possible that Tingana could cover Guchava's territory as well, but also there seems to be a lot of pressure from the south from other males. So at the moment, because of his age and because of the pressure around the place, his territory is relatively small. But if you go down onto the Sand River or something like that, you'll probably find that the males there have got 2 or 3 female territories, sometimes 4, within their own territories. And so they don't fight with each other for territory. They have territories exclusive of the same sex, but they overlap with leopards of the opposite sex. Does that make sense? I hope it does. It's the best I can do as an explanation. We've got action now, everybody. He's got his head up. His dewlap is flapping in the afternoon breeze. Now, that dewlap is quite interesting. I was reading about it the other day, and a little bit like a lion's mane, while we initially thought, well, it must be to protect him from fighting, because that's obviously the piece of his body that an enemy will go for, it would seem that it's also a bit of an indicator of testosterone, and the ladies find the dewlap very attractive in the same way that the lady lions find a black mane on males attractive. So he must be very attractive with that long, flat piece of hanging skin. Now, somebody else who's probably very attractive to lady lions is Brentley O'Smith, because he has a mane.
Thank you very much, Commander Bond. Thank you. We're still with our lone Inkahuma lioness. She's away from the rest of the pride. She is calling for them, but she slowly seems to be heading in the general direction to the north, towards Torchwood and Djuma. So I'm going to stick with her, and I'm hoping she might pull the rest of the lions with her. But you never know what's going to happen on a live safari. Now, it's been a busy week for the Inkahumas, as I said. Yesterday they stole a buffalo from the Styx Pride, but that's because earlier in the week they couldn't catch a buffalo of their own. The call for breakfast was out. The Inkahumas set off for a buffalo breakfast in the early morning. But the buffalo herd caught wind of the attack and stood their ground, alert and dangerous. The lions had to change tactics. It was now an open battle. buffalo chased lions, bulls pushing them away from the herd. The lions retaliated and singled out the lone bull. The predator and prey danced around each other. Until the bull broke free. The battle continued. The termite mound used as a barricade for both sides. Until the lions retreated, the battle was over. Welcome back. She's still just sitting there, looking towards the rest of the pride. I'm wondering, let's move around a bit, since maybe we'll be able to see the rest of the pride. If I just scoot around. Minamu is wondering, how does the drought affect the Nkahuma hunting? Well, it actually makes life a little bit easier for the Minamu. So when it's dry season like it is now, the animals are forced to certain drinking points like Chitwa Dam, so there's always going to be quite a lot of food around, and also things like buffalo that they like to hunt so much are not in the best of condition towards this time of the year. They're only going to be getting in good condition again when the rains come and they get some nice lush fresh green grasses. So I think from behind her we should be able to see where the rest of the pride are. I say it's quite interesting that she's on the move. That's why I've decided to stick with her. Okay, we're nearly in the position. Ninja Lady is wondering if it's possible for lion territories to expand. Indeed it is, Ninja Lady, especially as the pride gets bigger and bigger. No, let's go this side. Yeah. As the pride gets bigger and bigger and they need to hunt more and larger prey, they will often expand their territory, and especially if the peripheries. Okay, so here's our lovely lady right here off to the right. Hi, big girl. Well, they're not listening to you. She's been contact calling for them. And so there she is sitting there. And then across the valley, across the little river system called the Mwanini, under some large torchwood trees, the rest of the pride are lying in the shade there. You can see there's still a few game drive vehicles there. But I think let's stick with our lone lioness for now. And she seems to be the most active. It is always awesome to be able to sit this close to a lioness. Okay, well, we're going to sit and wait to see what happens next. In the meantime, let's see what Tristan has got next to the tent.
Well, we have not one of our characters, but maybe a cousin of Winston Churchill, who is seen around the Buffelshoek Dam. This is another yellow-billed hornbill that didn't want to be outdone by the cats this week, and so decided to come and join us at the tent. And so we were just admiring his beautiful yellow beak and his delightful feathers. I've also got my friend, and talking about cousins, this is a cousin of what we've been looking at all afternoon. You can see it is not in very good condition in comparison to the leopards we get to see every single week. In fact, I would imagine that this is a very poor condition to be in. Now it's disintegrating slowly but surely, this poor skull. It's unfortunately losing pieces pieces all over the place. It's done many a tent segment, and that's why, unfortunately, it looks the way it does. But you can imagine why Hosanna often gets a little bit intimidated by Thandi when she opens her mouth like this and snarls and snares, shows her teeth and makes a lot of noise. Now, talking about sort of why he gets intimidated by Thandi, the next kind of interaction that they had was once again Thandi being rather on the feisty side. Now, you'll see that basically what happened with this was when Hosanna had just arrived back once again, and he was kind of in the tree with his kill, and he managed to bring down, I think it was the diker that he was killed on the dam cam at this stage, but Thandi was having absolutely none of it. She decided that this was her opportunity to show the little chief exactly who was boss. He had been away for quite some time, and so for her, even though he had grown, she was still in control of what was going on. Now we were a lot further down the line. I mean, at the end of the day, she had already had Tlalamba now. Tlalamba was doing well, and she decided that this kill was hers. So she actually went up there, and you can see, look at his face, shame. He was very saddened by this whole story. He had this look on his face. Look at that. I'm sorry, Hosanna, did your big sister steal your kill? So yes, he was not looking very impressed by this all. You can see he's contact calling, so he's still in his sort of more kind of adolescent phase. And here he tries to approach a little bit closer, a big stretch, almost as if to say, no, I'm not really coming there, but we know where he was trying to go. He was trying to get back up the tree. Now, this is him going a little bit closer. You see, he's now seen an opportunity. He saw Thandi jump down. Now look at her response. Now I'll just stop there quickly. You'll see that she is again low down, watching what's going on. She sees him coming, and instead of moving away, she goes straight towards the tree and cuts him off basically. And you'll find now as we roll forward that she will not care about him at all. There's a few little snarls, and up she goes once again, and poor Hosanna is relegated to sitting down below. Now he doesn't fight with her at all. He's very intimidated by her. He kind of backs down and he cowers at her, and there was another instance later on in that evening where he actually got chased around by her a little bit. She kind of pushed him about, and he had to kind of just constantly move away, and he was almost as if to say, leave me alone, I don't want to fight with you. But she just kept on at him, and that would have been not only because she wants to try and intimidate him to sort of get meals out of it, but also because Tlalamba was still vulnerable at this stage. Tlalamba at that point was, what would she have been? She would have been about 9 months old, 8 months, 9 months old. And that means she would have been very vulnerable still to attack by a male leopard. And so most of what Thandi was doing was not only dominating Hosanna and showing him that she was still in control of what was going on and still bigger and stronger, even though he had now bulked up, but also she was trying to protect her one kind of offspring that she's got at the moment. So she's trying to make sure that little Tlalamba makes it further in life. And so every time Hosanna would move, and if it would be any way into the direction of where Tlalamba was, so she would get aggressive with him immediately and start snarling and hissing. And she was really very nasty to him in those beginning kind of phases when he first arrived back. She used to just always be showing her teeth and trying to kind of push him. And you could see all he wanted to do was just try and get away. He was just trying to move and try and kind of keep out of her way, but she didn't want any of it. Every time he would move, so she would come at him again, and lots of kind of dominating of poor Hosanna. And he would flatten his head down, he would even turn his back, and he'd roll on his back. And it was all the submissive signs that a leopard displays when it knows it's out of its kind of weight category and it doesn't want to actually fight it. It cowers and tries to make itself as small as possible. And Thandi kind of just took advantage of that completely, and she really kind of dominated him. And the thing is, for Thandi, as I can understand it, everyone often calls her a bit of a horrible leopard because of it, and it's not that. I mean, she's doing what's natural, and she's doing what's good for the survival of not only her but her cubs as well and her area. And so it's understandable that she is that way. You must understand that Thandi has been a very, very clever leopard over the last year. Everyone gives her a lot of trouble because of her sort of aggressiveness and because of the way she went after Shongile and obviously her interactions with Hosanna. But actually, when you look at it, she's been absolutely phenomenal in being able to keep Tlalamba safe. You must remember that Tingana's been sick and has disappeared. Hukamuri's moved in. Hosanna's been around. Even Tamba was around when little Tlalamba was born, and she's somehow managed to thread through all of that and keep that little cub safe. So it's important that she is that way, otherwise she would really struggle with what's going on. So Jenica, I mean, no, I don't think that's the only reason. Obviously, there's a perk in this. Tingana being sort of tolerant of Hosana is getting food out of him, but it's more along the lines that he recognizes Hosana. He will have smelt Hosana from the day he was born. This has always been within his territory, so he knows what Hosana smells like. He can also, judging by Hosana's size, see that he is not nearly in the same weight category as what Tingana is, and therefore not a threat. And he is not, he's not able to intimidate Tingana in any way at his age at the moment, Hosana. The second thing or third thing is that he is not really mating. He's not vocalizing. He's not issuing any sort of challenge to Tingana, and so Tingana basically still sees him as that son that is in his territory and is still kind of allowing him to be here, because at the end of the day he's not a threat to Tingana himself, and that's why we're not seeing these things. And in terms of them feeding together, well, that's just natural. You'll see that with many different leopards. We've seen it with Mvula before, we've seen it with Mafufanyan. They will run in, they'll feed, and as long as they're on the carcass, they actually don't really care too much who is down below them. They will be fairly alright, unless of course it is another big male leopard. So if you get, let's say, Tingana in a tree and Hukamuri arrived, different story altogether. Then you will find that they'll come to blows, because both of them are quite large. Well, obviously Hukamuri is not quite as big as Tingana, but they're adult male leopards, and they'll find that there'll be a lot more of a showdown in that regard, whereas Hosana is still very submissive towards Tingana. Now, talking about Tingana, let's send you back across to the Duke and see whether or not he's woken up.
Well, unsurprisingly, the Duke is not doing very much, but the light is perfect underneath this beautiful milkberry tree. The kill is still very relaxed as it was when we got here, and is unlikely to become unrelaxed. And there, of course, is Tingana, who is also unlikely to become unrelaxed, save that he might do us the courtesy of going up the tree and standing in this golden, magnificent sunset light. That would be very special. Tingana, come on now. Judy, yeah, it's just simply because we're getting a slightly warped view of what leopard social structure is on account of the fact that we're not moving around in a bigger area. Yes, there do appear to be more male leopards on Djuma. That's simply because Djuma is not very large. I mean, it's large enough, obviously, if you want to see leopards. But we're sitting on a property with a male leopard here, Tingana, and his son, Hosana. That's not particularly unusual. Yes, Tingana's territory is not massive, which means that we do from time to time see Hukamuri, who actually has a very small piece of Djuma. The far eastern end of his territory is Djuma, or is the western end of Djuma. So let me say that again. The far eastern section of Hukamuri's territory is the western end of Djuma, where Tingana doesn't really go. And so Hukamuri's, while we talk about Hukamuri and we talk about him being part of the Djuma leopards, really he probably spends less than 5% of his time on Djuma. The rest he spends defending his territory way to the west of where we are now. And interestingly, pretty much exactly where Tingana used to operate when Mvula was here and when the Anderson male was much further to the west. Mvula was another male that we had, but he has since passed on. So I don't think there's an unusual concentration of male leopards here at all. I just think it's because we talk about the male leopards a lot, because Hosana is here, and because our property happens to have the territorial boundary between Hukamuri and Tingana. Does that make sense? Hello, big fella. Oh, you poor little fellow. He's got allergies, David. It's springtime. It's the pollen in the air. He's like Sebastian. Can't stop sneezing. Look how yellow his teeth are. They are still astonishingly sharp for a leopard of his age, though. If you look at Tundi's canines, I don't think they're nearly that sharp. In fine condition, Tingana. Your chompers, your daggers. I've always wondered what on earth the point of having incisors is for cats and dogs. I mean, those things must be worse than useless. They're almost sort of entirely vestigial. Vestigial. He's a magnificent fellow, this. Doesn't look like a thief, does he? But I'm afraid he is a thief. And very interestingly, over at Chitwa, a lion is calling before it's dark.
Well, she's just contact calling, trying to inspire the rest of her pride to come join her all the way over here. They're still, I suppose, 700-800 meters away under those trees in front of us here. There we go, we can see them. Might be able to catch a glimpse of one of them. Let's have a look. There we go. You can see them all snoozing over there. Not too interested in her contact calls just yet. Hi, Ginger. Ginger's wondering which is the biggest pride in the Sabi Sands. To be honest, Ginger, I'm not 100% sure. The biggest pride in the northern Sabi Sands currently is probably the Torchwood Pride. And they are generally, this is actually quite close to the boundary between how far east the Inkahumas go and how, I suppose, at the moment they're all bombing all over the place to avoid the evokers, except for the Talamati Pride, who have joined up with the evokers. And that's why that young male is currently with the Inkahuma Pride. Oh, shame, Kitty, are you tired? Now, some of them look like they could do... Oh, she's got a stick stuck on her tail. Try to get rid of it. And bite the flies that are trying to bite her. Give herself a little clean. So I said that Talamati young male has hooked up with the Inkahuma Pride to try avoid the evoker males, because his pride has accepted them. Oh, swatting her face. And some of the little biting flies, little stable flies, obviously starting to irritate her a bit. Philip is wondering, is it true that the oldest Birmingham boy has passed away? Philip, I don't know. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. It's possible, but I cannot neither confirm nor deny. They have not been in any of our Travis areas for quite some time. So I say it's very difficult for us to know for sure. Might not have been seen in a long time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he has passed away. There we go, she's calling again. Oh, look at that lovely light on her face. Absolutely gorgeous. You can see those low contact calls can be heard by the other lions for a lot greater distance than we can hear them for. Now, lion prides that are being pressured by new males. Oh, she's gorgeous, isn't she? So beautiful. And so lion prides that are being pressured by other males or new males will often keep all their sort of contact calls to that low. To hope that the big males nearby don't hear it, if the big males are nearby. So if that's a roar properly, they can be heard for an incredible distance, over 10 kilometers. So they'll try avoid that when they're trying to avoid males. Now it looks like she might be looking for the 3 missing members of the pride. So I'm going to stick with her. In the meantime, it sounds like Tingana has maybe woken up.
Well, I think up is a very strong term for what Tingana is right now. But he might get up. I think he's just uncomfortable. I'm not sure that he's thinking about eating again. I think he's just uncomfortable lying in the position that he was in. Anna-Marie, I don't know. You say if Tingana passed, I presume you mean if he was to, die, not to put too fine a point on it. Would Hukamuri take his territory? I think you'd probably find that Hosana would not, because he's not big enough and old enough yet. I think you'd find that Hukamuri would extend to the east a little bit, perhaps, thinking to himself, well, I can't smell another leopard here anymore, so I'll just come into the area. So that would definitely happen, because it already has happened in some respects. Remember when he was so sick, Tingana, he was down at Chitwa Dam for months on end, and that's when Hukamuri came into this area and started marking right in Tingana's domain. And eventually, when Tingana recovered, Hukamuri went back to the west. And so, yes, I think it's quite likely that Hukamuri would take certainly at least some of the territory. But there's no reason that another leopard wouldn't come in from the north, say Gijima, or perhaps from the south, say, who's down there in the south? That is an unknown skittish male, maybe Umfukazi, the so far territorialless male, might manage to set himself up here, or quite possibly quarantine the male leopard to the far east, and not related to Tingana, but brother to Tandi, could come into this area and take over. So, there are any number of things that could happen. Certainly one of the possibilities that Hukamuri would take the whole lot, probably more likely that it would be divided up. But a good question, very good question. You see, I think he was just uncomfortable. Unfortunately, he's not showing any signs of climbing that tree. What we need is Hosana to pitch up, because if Hosana pitches up, there is no question that Tingana will go back up here. Now, unlike this cat, which has gone to sleep, Leo Smith has got one that is posing beautifully in the light.
Isn't this absolutely gorgeous? So the sun is setting directly behind this lioness at the moment, and she's perched herself on top of a termite mound, and she's continuing to contact call. Absolutely stunning. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, shame she sounds so lonely. Oh, come guys, come here. Magic, lovely scenes. Absolutely lovely. Very, very beautiful. Yeah, you don't get much better than that, do you? Magic, magic, magic. So I think she might be looking for the missing members of the Pride. She knows where the other three are. But the rest of the Pride are just behind us, but there are still 3 members missing. So she might very well might be looking for those 3 missing lions. Well, it seems like Tristan's getting all the visitors to the tent today.
We are indeed. We've got Benjamin Bunny that is visiting us, as Craig calls him, and you can see his big ears glowing in the golden light. Hello, little bunny. How are you? Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Now, this you can see is very close. There's the little rope that keeps our tent up. Oh, yes, we're going to shake it off. off we go. And this little fella's been around the tent all afternoon, but he was sleeping for most of it and has now decided it's time to wake up. And it's also very itchy all over the place. I wonder if he's got a few ticks or little fleas on him. But you can see it's coming right up to where the tent is. That's between the computer screens. Hello. What are you doing here? Well, I'm just going to the toilet is what I'm doing. I'm just going to poo on your doorstep. Yes, this is because we're talking about leopards. It's showing what it thinks about leopards. Yes, next week we'll do scrub hair discussion, and this will be our guest co-host, Benjamin Bunny. Yes, off we go. Okay, well done. Stage fright, yes, we mentioned that it'll have to co-host, and it got a fright because it might have been with Brent and didn't want to do so. Anyway, we are still talking all things leopard when it comes to Hosana and Thandi, and it's obviously, we saw how Thandi's really bossed the relationship so far and has really kind of taken advantage of poor little Hosana. But obviously, as things go, male leopards get bigger, and that means that Thandi is going to have to start learning a bit of a lesson. So basically what we see here is this is Hosana approaching towards a kill, and this morning was really quite an epic one. We had the best scene. It was very, very kind of misty and hazy, and you can see there comes Thandi running in now. She's trying to be aggressive towards him and trying really hard to kind of tackle him. So if we go back a little bit, you'll see Hosana has lost that fear that he had even back a little further. If we go back, and you'll see that when he first approaches, back more, we can go back, that's Thandi running in. So you'll find when he first approaches, you can see that he can see that Thandi is coming. So he is in no way now intimidated by her. He knows that there's food around, and so he's striding pretty much straight towards her. See there, he spotted her already, and he makes the conscious decision that I actually don't care about her right now. I'm going to make my way. And so he's starting now to think, hang on a second, I don't need to be bullied by this female anymore. Here you can see Thandi continues with her normal aggressive kind of approach. She runs in really aggressively towards him, and then a whole kind of tangle ensues, and it's behind a bit of a bush, unfortunately. But Thandi tackles Hosana. Hosana tries to run away, and there you see Hosana gets up. He's on his back. He starts to get up and run, and Thandi's off after him. And he now doesn't really know what to do, so he continues to run away. She continues to chase him. And so this has been the normal kind of game that they've played over the last little bit, and it continues to kind of go around this termite mound. What unfortunately happens is, because if we pause there, is that Tlalamba was actually there as well, and so poor Thandi, I think, got a bit concerned by, oh, hang on, where's Tlalamba and all of this, and she paused, and that allowed Hosana to take a bit of a breath and spot the carcass. He then picked up where the carcass was, and we roll it there. You'll see he starts to then move towards the carcass itself. He kind of watches where Thandi is, and he now sees that there's a gap to the carcass, and he actually gets in on it and is able to then pick it up for himself and kind of drag it off. By this point, Thandi has realized, well, there's no chance for me, and so she starts to kind of move off, and you can see her posture's changed a little bit. She's not as upright as she used to be when approaching towards Hosana, and there's the little chuffing as she calls Tlalamba and tries to figure out where her little one is. So quite interesting to kind of see how it all sort of works, and to see how the two of them kind of have started to, now the balance is starting to equal. And so this was about, it wasn't that long after that first incident where he returned and Thandi chased him off his little diker kill, and so he started to exact revenge. And basically what's probably happened is that he's watched Tingana come and rob him, he's watched Thandi rob him, and he's then figured out, hang on a second, I'm actually bigger than her now, I don't need to take this anymore. And you can see, even though they got physical, he's just so much bigger than her that she tries and tries and tries, and eventually he just kind of steamrolls past her, and she's not really much she can do. And so after this, he's now worked out, but she couldn't stop me, even though she tried. She might have kind of growled at me and hissed at me and clawed at me, but actually it didn't really hurt, and I got past her and I got the meal anyway. And so that would have been a very big moment for Hosana and his relationship, and how it's going to change with Thandi going forward. He would have now basically asserted himself as being bigger than her, and that she would have to start to think about being a little bit more respectful, particularly around food. I think without food at that point, he was still quite shy of her aggressiveness, but with food now on the table and the way things were going, he was a far bigger threat to her at food, and she now started to realize that she needed to back off, and she lost 2 kills to him very quick succession because of that technique that he just kind of ran in and took it away. And so it was interesting. It was very interesting to see also how her kind of aggressiveness gave way very quickly to defense of her cub, and she would then run off and try and find Tlalamba first. Anyway, we'll pick that up again because there's still one last little sort of series of images we need to show you, and which will kind of explain everything. And while we kind of think about how we're going to order them, actually there's two, not one, I lie, sorry. Let's send you back across to Tingana, and we'll see you all just now.
Well, Tingana has just had a bit of an experience, and I think it was with Corky. She came right past here. He sat up and he said the following. He said, and then Corky said the following to him. She went, and then she walked away. And I think it was Corky because she had the rip in her ear, and also she's very clearly lactating, so she's quite far from the den, but she came to see if she could find something here to eat. Alas, Tingana is much too wily for that, and he has left his kill in the tree. Well, Kita, that's a lovely one. I don't know, obviously, but let's count them, the ones that I do know. We've got Shungilia and Hosana, obviously. Do we mean living ones or dead ones as well? Let's say living ones, because there must be many dead ones, because so many leopard cubs die, of course. So we've got Hosana, we've got Tamba. We think that he fathered Tamba. Who else does he have? I don't know of many others. Quite possibly Sindile, who was a male leopard who dispersed after a rather trying time with rabies. He was put in quarantine and then came back. We've got Tlalamba, of course. Let us not forget the princess. And was he not the father of, Tristan will be able to tell you this, of some of Salayeshe's youngsters, possibly some of Kwatile's youngsters? I'm not sure if she had any that survived to adulthood. And certainly Guchava's youngsters, she had one of his that died, unfortunately. And any number with Shadow, all of them, apart from Sindile, unfortunately did not make it. So I don't know. I'm going to put a guess at around about 7 or so, maybe 10 that have survived. He's had a pretty good life, I think. He's got a pretty good return. Just for a male leopard to make it to adulthood is really quite an achievement. To then achieve mating and defending a territory for the length of time that he has, and having offspring that go independent, leave home and go and continue to send his genes into the world, well, that's wonderful. Yes, there is a belief, Philip, that Tamba was sired by Mvula, mainly because people say he looks like Mvula. I'm unconvinced. I'm not sure when Thandi was seen mating with Mvula, but I think that unless we did a DNA test, I would go with the most likely option, which is Tingana. It's not impossible that Tamba is Mvula's youngster, but it's not for sure. And as we always say, you cannot tell by saying, well, no, he looks like that leopard, so therefore he must be related. I don't believe that we are able to discern the details of their physiques sufficiently to be able to say that. The only way to do that would be to do a DNA test, which apparently have been done. Why on earth we don't have them, I'm not sure. Apparently these DNA tests take longer than it took to excavate the entire Homo naledi skeleton, put it together and describe it. So I'm really not sure why we haven't seen any sign of that research. Certainly you'd think the people who had to walk around picking up the poo would have been privy to the results of that research. Maybe we can try and find out. And I believe that Brent's Leoness is still showing off, still silhouetted, and so let's go and have a look at her.
She is just in the most gorgeous position as the sun is setting. Isn't that spectacular? Still contact calling. Looking probably for the missing members of the pride. We only saw I think it was 8 Nkuhumas, 8 of the Nkuhuma pride, which means there are still 3 missing, and that's possibly who she might be calling for. But just enjoy this spectacular sunset with a spectacular lioness. Sometimes it just doesn't get much better than this. Sitting quietly in the late African afternoon and watching this magnificent scene. Jan would like to know how far lions can hear. Jan, it depends on how they're calling. If they're doing a full roar, it can probably be heard for up to 15 or 20 kilometers away by other lions. And human beings, you can easily hear them when they're 8 to 10 kilometers away. So it all just depends, Jan. These low contact calls, I'll say, probably can be heard for about 1 kilometer. And you can see that sun is dropping fast now. She seems quite intent on finding the missing members of the pride. She's been vocalizing constantly since she left the main body of the pride lying up not too far away. Joe would like to know, is she in danger because she's on her own? Not really, Joe. The rest of the pride aren't far away, and lions do spend a bit of time on their own, especially when females set off to go look for males to mate with. So it's not that uncommon to see a lioness all on her own. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You do truly get to experience some magic moments being out here in the bush. Ginger is wondering, are the other lions just ignoring her? It's a possibility, Ginger. For prides do get split, and especially if they've been chasing another pride of lions. It's not the most uncommon thing for a pride to get split. So it could be that while in the pandemonium of chasing the Styx pride, they got separated. Now they have split a few times this year, the Nkuhumas. That sun dipping down below her head. Beautiful. Absolutely stunning. Okay, it seems like there's a bit of confusion. The Nkuhuma Pride stole a buffalo kill from the Styx Pride on Cheetah Plains yesterday. There's not much to it other than that. The Styx then ran away and they went into Mala Mala, and the Nkuhumas obviously finished the buffalo and then today moved back towards Chitwa Chitwa. And they're now right on the northern boundary of Chitwa. We're not far away from Torchwood. So there's a strong possibility they might even turn up on Djuma in the morning. There's been quite a lot of buffalo around Djuma, and that could attract the Nkuhumas, especially with the Talamatis keeping the Avoca males busy quite far to the north. Critter Writer says she's got a sun halo. Indeed she does, Critter Writer. Isn't that spectacular? There's not very many lions you get to see with a halo. Oh, bless you, Senzo. And oh, she's starting to call a bit more properly now. I'm going to keep quiet. That was stunning. See her ears still flicking to fight off the biting flies. I'm not going to move a muscle. I'm going to sit here with this gorgeous girl as the sun sets. But let's go see what Tristy has to say about Hasana and Tandi.
Well, I'm trying to be stunning too in the sunlight. Look at me. There we go. Ben can describe us as stunning as well. Anyway, we're just messing around. Of course, this is what we do. Now, I know James has also sent a lot of questions my way. So I thought while I was sitting here and he was talking about Tingana's offspring, I thought I'd just jot it down. And before any of you lash out at me, these are hypotheticals and I'm going to explain the reasons why. So what we know is that these two are most definitely alive at the moment. So Hosana and Tlalamba for sure are alive and kicking and doing their thing. We know that those 100% are Tinganas and are alive. Now I've got a question mark here because these potentially could be him or they could be other males. You see Kunyuma and you'll see Quarantine and you'll see Shavinzi and Shivambalana on here, which a lot of you will immediately start shouting, no, it wasn't him, he wasn't around Mvula. I can promise you that both of those she mated with them before both of those litters were born. And I personally saw that myself. If one day I saw Karula all the way down on Elephant Plains mating with Tingana before Shavinzi and Shivambalana were born, as well as Kunyuma and Quarantine. So it is highly possible that they might have some sort of DNA. Tsakani, which is one of Kwatile's offspring, she's now a dominant female down in the southern parts of the Kruger National Park. Potentially could be his, also could be Lamula's, could also be Mvula's. So there's a bit of a kind of there. Insela had two cubs. That was in Chile, and the other one, which we think was Anderson potentially, but could have also been Tingana, as she did mate with him. Tamba, as James just discussed. Sindile, as James discussed. Kuchava, we all think Mvula, we know that, but potentially could be. Tingana was starting to mate with Tandi at the time. The Buffelshoek female, that she had two up until about we know that the two were being seen during the course of this year, so they could also be from him. Now, that's all the ones that are potentially still alive. These are all the ones, however, that are dead or missing. Now, Shadow, I know of 4 different cubs that she mated with Tingana. There might even be more than that she's lost. That includes not Barbara. Shongile, obviously, we know is MIA. Salehesh had 2 different litters of 2 each that went missing under his reign. Insele had 1 that she lost under, potentially could have been his. Moya lost 1, also could have been his when he mated with her. Tandi, which would have been Tumba's litter mate, potentially. Kwatile, she had 3 cubs when she disappeared, and all 3 of them died. Kuchava obviously had her cub now that we thought was his. And Karula, I say the one because there was that one that was killed, and we don't know whether or not it was his. But all in all, if you look at it, that is a lot of leopards that Tingana has produced, so he seems to be fairly fertile. And I know a lot of you will disagree with some of these, and that's okay. I'm just hypothetically throwing out that they could very well be, as James mentioned. DNA is really the only way to tell. We don't know for sure. I'm just telling you that I saw him mate with those females around those times, and therefore it's possible that it could be. I could be completely wrong, and I say that I'm open to be proved wrong, but like I said, just from what I saw, it's potentially could be what this is. Anyway, back to Hosanna and Tandi. I was saying that he was starting to assert himself, and well, last weekend Sunday we saw the 2 of them come together once again. So basically what we're going to see, this was at the Stolen Kill where Tingana thieved from Hosanna, and we were sitting there watching, well, not much taking place. Everyone was taking it very easy. As you can see, Hosanna was in a familiar pose, much like his dad does. There's his dad sausaging in the tree. As per normal, Tingana loves to do a good sausage impersonation, and so like father, like son. But then came the older sister. So there comes Tandi, and she walked in, and you can see she's sniffing about, not quite as confident as she used to be. You see, she's kind of a little bit more sort of nervy, and there she's growling at him and hissing, and her posture, you see, is not upright and very confident. Now she's a little bit more kind of lower down, ears a little bit more flattened, and her posture is a little bit more like what we saw from Shongile, isn't it? It's amazing how it's now changed, whereas if you look at Hosanna, you can see he's quite confident about himself. He's got his head up, he's growling a little bit, and he's fairly kind of happy with life. Now you'll see she'll get quite aggressive towards him, and she'll snarl, and he'll just be kind of, I'm over you, I'm going to get out the way because I don't feel like your drama this morning. And he kind of moves off a little bit towards where Dad is. Dad, of course, well, he's still sausaging. Very much so. He's not doing anything. Tandi is still very grumpy, as you can see there. She's still quite kind of upset about the whole thing. She's growling, she's hissing. She's not very happy about this at all. Now you'll see Hosanna gets up and briefly sort of chases after her a little bit. He's now had enough of being shouted at and growled at, and then she sees her again and kind of trots off and moves away, and he's deciding now, well, I'm going to go lie somewhere else, and I'm not going to take this nonsense anymore. I'm tired of it. But you will see there that there's some salivation that started. Now if we can pause it here, you'll see that there's the salivation, and then he lies next to her. So what happened here is he had been chased by her, I don't know, 2 or 3 times now. She had growled at him, hissed at him, and he'd tried to get away, and she was just being full of nonsense. But what had actually probably transpired here is that the reason she had been very aggressive towards him moving in this direction is because behind where Tandi is, later in the day, about 3 or 4 hours later, emerged Tlalamba, and so I'm pretty sure she was being aggressive to him also because he moved in the direction of Tlalamba, but essentially she was just being full of nonsense to him and kept just kind of charging at him. So Hosanna went and lay quite close by. Now you'll see on the right hand side there, that body posture you can see is one of a submissive cat. He's not really showing himself to be threatening. He's trying to be non-threatening towards her. He's rolling around, and that's more a playful kind of attitude, as if to say, stop growling at me, really, I'm not going to do anything to you, I'm just going to sit here. But she kept on going, and she kept growling, kept hissing, kept giving him nonsense, and poor Hosanna had had enough. And if you stop here now, you can see the difference in what just happened is incredible. So normally what we saw was Tandi being far more aggressive, coming in, chasing Hosanna, dominating him, and Hosanna being the one that was kind of compressed to the ground and looking up and being very defensive. Now what you see is Tandi is immediately backing off. You see what? She backs off. She shows her teeth, but she realizes this is not stopping him. So she backs off, and she now goes onto her side and uses the tree as a bit of cover from Hosanna. And he sits there, and he now growls at her and really has it at her. And you see how he's standing? He's no longer intimidated by Thandi. And that picture right there is the complete 180 of what we saw a year ago when she was still with Tamba. And I was saying that it's important that we make a note of that because Klalamba and Tamba are of a similar age right now. So it's nothing to do with the fact that she's got offsprings, because last year this time she was far more aggressive to Hosanna. Hosanna was the one having to back down. This year we roll a year forward, a little bit more than a year forward, and Klalamba is the same age, and yet Thandi's reaction is the complete 180 of what it was. You see how she's using the tree, and eventually Hosanna realizes he's proved his point, backs away, and Thandi just realizes, hang on a second, it's not like it used to be. There's no longer a time where I can dominate this male, even away from food, because there was no food involved. And you'll see when, as Hosanna kind of struts off, he's proved his point, he knows he's proved his point, and he actually moves back towards the kill, and he leaves Thandi looking very shocked. And look at that face. I had to giggle in the sighting because she looks thoroughly kind of distraught at what's just taken place, and almost a bit kind of, I don't know, perplexed as to what just happened. And it's amazing to see that Hosanna has really kind of stepped up now and has put his foot down and has said, that's it, I'm done with you, I'm not taking your nonsense anymore. And so it's gone full circle from Thandi being the aggressor and really dominating this young little male leopard that had just lost his mom, to all of a sudden now he's proving a point to her that I'm not taking your nonsense anymore. I'm going to now be the one that dictates our relationship, and you can stop your nonsense. Now what that means is that when Klalamba starts to move off, depending on when that is, I mean, that could be anywhere from now, and I heard James alluding to this fact earlier, is that it's very possible that Thandi is starting to get aggressive. If we look at, with Klalamba to actually push her on, if we look at Tamba, it was the exact same time that she started to get aggressive with him and kind of leave him for longer periods and so on. And so if she chases Klalamba off, let's say within the next 3 months, which is very possible, it might be longer, obviously it might be shorter, but I reckon 3 months is the least we're looking at the moment. But if that happens, by then Hosanna has gone over 3 years old. Tingana is then starting to push over 13, and then you're going to see that maybe Hosanna might become interested, and she, now knowing that Hosanna has dominated her, might actually even allow him to mate with her, which is quite interesting. Anyway, we'll get into it again just now. While we do that though, it sounds like Brent's lions have finally started to come together.
Did all of a sudden one of the young lionesses came bounding to the top of the termite mound to join the other, and the Talamati males just down to the right, and then 3 Mangen males on their way. And I can't see, and there's another lioness, so there's lots of lions arriving at the moment. None behind you, Sens? Okay, just checking. But absolutely splendid. That's why being patient often pays off. There we go. Oh, isn't that gorgeous? She's growling at those young males as she comes down, heading off towards one of the other females. Absolutely magical. Little greeting. Hi. Been calling you guys forever. And flop down again. Oh, here comes trouble. The 3 Mangeni boys are starting to come in a bit closer. And I don't want to go too close. Here they come. Now you might hear some growls. They might even give them a little charge. Shame, he's one of the worst of the 3. He's just positioning himself between them. Comes the next one. Okay, well, we're going to sit here to see how this plays out. Shame boy. Let's go across to the Juma hyenas.
Yes, well, we're at the Juma hyenas. You can see all the hyenas playing there. Isn't that a lovely sight of all the Juma hyenas playing? Well done, David. A beautiful shot there of the Juma hyenas playing. Obviously, I'm talking rubbish. The Juma hyenas, unfortunately, are not at their den site, which is something of an irritation, because we came all the way here hoping that we'd see some cute cubs. And the reason we were hoping that we'd see some cute cubs is because we have been seeing some cute cubs, and they've been playing in infrared most of the time.
Corky's cub, now named Shim, was out playing in the evening despite her mother's absence. With its patchy face, Shim is easy to identify. Next to appear was Pretty's cub, and despite being obviously older than Shim, probably by about 5 weeks, is dominated by the precocious youngster who has inherited Corky's high rank. A further surprise emerged on our next visit. A third cub poked its head out of the den. Pretty has 2 cubs, probably a daughter and a smaller son. Now, precocious Shim has 2 playmates to bully.
So there you have it. They were playing right there in the dark. And I think we're probably about, I'm going to say about 20 minutes early. Pretty certainly normally seems to come back at sundown. Corky was definitely down with Tingana. It's not too far from here, so she could be back at sundown. And then, of course, the cubs will come out. But unfortunately, they are not out at the moment. So just to recap, there are 3 cubs at least. In fact, almost certainly just 3 cubs in that hole. We've got Pretty's 2, 1 male and 1 female, and we have got Shim. We've called it Shim. It doesn't necessarily have to be called Shim at all. That's just a rather amusing name for an animal whose sex we don't know. So we don't know if it's a male or a female, so it is not a he or a she, but a Shim. So, Lorena, you wanted to know why he was called Shim, or it was called Shim, that's why. It's not an official name, it's a name in progress, if you like. Good. So, I'm afraid we don't have any hyenas here. We'll show you the sunset, which is very gorgeous, even despite the lack of hyenas. And in the meantime, I think let us head back to the tent, where the sunset is always gorgeous, with Tristan, and he'll be talking more about the leopards.
Indeed, we do want to talk more about the leopards. I'm not convinced about James's name. He thinks it's hilarious. He walks around giggling about it all the time, and I suppose, you know, that is James's humour. And so Shim it is for now, James. We'll have to... it was quite funny because there was a collective what when we watched that clip earlier today, where Jamie and Brent turned around, and myself, and we were all kind of puzzled as to why it was called Shim, and it was the first we were hearing about it. But obviously James was just having a bit of a laugh about the whole thing in the end. But it's interesting to have the hyenas back on property, and it's certainly going to make life a very kind of... I don't know, it's going to make life good in many respects, that they're back on. It really is going to kind of shake things up a little bit with our other predators. The leopards had it easy for a while when there were not too many hyenas around, and you know, now there's lots about, and it's really quite nice for us because the hyenas are an incredible animal, and I always like watching the interactions between these guys, the leopards and both the hyenas. Now, I was saying that we've had lots of interactions. The last interaction that we saw with Hosanna and Tandi, there was a definite change in things, and well, there was not the last interaction that we actually had. There was one more after that. Right, so this was the last time the two met, and this was this week, and we had them on quarantine. There was a big kill that, funny enough, the Juma clan killed, which was a kudu. And I don't think it was our leopards, to be honest. I think the hyenas maybe brought this down. You never know, obviously, it's possible. Tandi has I've seen her bring down a kudu before, and so it is possible. But you can see the size of that carcass in relation to her. It is absolutely massive. But look at the way that she approaches this kill. Now, if we just stop, if we can go back a little bit for me, please. Okay, so as you roll back, you'll see, watch how she approaches. Her head is down, and she's far more slow and steady about her approach. So you see she goes nice and low. She's checking to the we watched earlier of when she raced up the jackalberry tree in front of Hosanna. You can see she's a little bit more nervous about approaching food while he's in the area. By this time they had seen each other, so they knew that they were both there. She approached while Hosanna was feeding at first, and then Aina kind of chased everybody off, and that's why she got an opportunity to come in. But you can see she's a lot more wary. She's sniffing. She's trying to work out what's going on here, and you'll find then she'll start to feed. And that's kind of where it was going, and by the stage Hosanna had a good feed, but after a while his curiosity got the best of him. And look at his approach now. That is very different leopard to what we saw a while ago, where he approached kind of a little bit sheepishly. This is him actually kind of coming in and stalking her. Now I think if she hadn't spotted him there, he would have actually run in and chased her, but look at her posture. It's immediately completely different. So the last sighting we saw, if we can just pause it there, and the last sighting that we saw her being very aggressive until such time as he charged at her and really went at her. Whereas now what we're seeing is, as soon as he kind of approached, she's down immediately, she's cowering, she's very much like what Shongile was doing with Thandi all the way back to last year. So the tables have turned. Hosanna stands there, he kind of poses very confidently and then decides, he's not worth it, I'm going to go and sit in the shade and go and rest. It was very hot by this stage, and so I'm not surprised that he went off and lay down. But it is very clear that Hosanna has now taken over in terms of the dominant sort of leopard within that relationship. And isn't it incredible how different you can actually see the behavior and the sort of body postures are in just such a short time? In the space of not even 4 months, that entire relationship has completely turned on its head, and poor Thandi now is, I think, left wondering what's going on. And she's definitely learned a lesson, because her whole demeanor is completely different. But it does bring the question, will that mean that Hosanna and Thandi could potentially have a litter going forward? It's quite interesting. It would be sisters mating, and would be quite weird, but it is possible. I reckon Thandi does definitely have at least one more in her, and hopefully she does, because that will then take her past her mother in terms of number of litters that she has, which is quite incredible, thinking that Thandi has actually will have had 6 litters, as opposed, I suppose Karula had 6 too, so it will be very, very close, and she's done very, very well. Well, anyway, it's that time though. We're going to start heading back. We're going to close up the tent. Hopefully you enjoyed our leopard discussion, as well as Tingana and the most epic view of those lions on this termite mound. So from myself, Brent and James, all the cam-ups, and Kirsty in final control, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you tomorrow morning on our sunrise safari.